The alien queen held my arm tightly and said, "It's time to go home." The first thing Kale noticed wasn't the pain radiating through his skull or the metallic taste of blood in his mouth, or even the fact that he was lying face down in what appeared to be purple sand. No, the first thing that caught his attention was the sound of someone humming what sounded suspiciously like a lullaby, except the melody seemed to be coming from inside his own head. He pushed himself up on his elbows, spitting out gritty particles that sparkled like crushed gemstones, and immediately regretted the movement. His ribs felt like they'd been used as a xylophone by an enthusiastic toddler. The humming stopped abruptly, replaced by a voice that was definitely not, coming from inside his head. "Oh, good, you're not dead." I was beginning to wonder if I'd miscalculated the atmospheric pressure conversion. That would have been embarrassing to explain to the galactic health and safety commission. Kale turned his head, which protested with a symphony of clicks and pops toward the source of the voice. A woman sat perched on a chunk of twisted metal that might have once been part of a spacecraft, though it was hard to tell since it was currently glowing a soft amber color and occasionally emitting what sounded like frustrated sighs. She appeared human enough if you ignore the ears that came to elegant points and the way her skin seemed to shimmer with an opalescent quality that made her look like she'd been dipped in liquid starlight. Health and Safety Commission. Kale croaked, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Are we talking about the same galaxy where people regularly vacation? On planets with acid rain and sentient volcanoes?" The woman's lips curved into what might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell if she was amused or simply pleased that he could form coherent sentences. Fair point, though, to be honest. The acid rain planets have excellent spa reviews. Something about the mineral. Content being good for your pores. Kale managed to sit up fully, taking in their surroundings with a kind of bewildered fascination usually reserved for people discovering their coffee maker had achieved sentience overnight. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, a patchwork of crystalline formations that pulsed with internal light, and structures that defied every law of physics he'd ever learned. Towers twisted skyward in spirals that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his eyes could properly process, while bridges of pure energy connected floating platforms that drifted lazily through the air like cosmic lily pads. "Right," he said, rubbing his temples where a headache was building pressure like an overzealous steam engine. Standard question for this type of situation. Where am I? Who are you? And should I be concerned about the fact that those crystal things keep looking at me? In Order, a planet whose name roughly translates to the place where good intentions come to die, though the tourism board prefers Nexus Point Alpha. I'm Elora, former queen of things that no longer exist, current expert in improvised survival techniques. And yes, you should definitely be concerned about the crystals. They're not looking at you so much as they're trying to figure out why your bioelectric field tastes like, how do I put this diplomatically, like a cosmic accident waiting to happen. Kale blinked slowly. That's either the most honest introduction I've ever received, or you're having way too much fun with my probable concussion. Eller slid down from her perch with fluid grace, her feet touching the purple sand without making a sound. Up close, he could see that her eyes were a shade of violet that seemed to shift and change like Aurora Borealis, and her hair moved as if it were floating underwater despite the lack of any visible breeze. "A little of both, if I'm being completely honest," she said, extending a hand to help him up. "But mostly, I'm just relieved to finally find someone whose presence doesn't make the local quantum field have what I can only describe as a nervous breakdown." Her touch was warm, surprisingly solid, and came with a mild electrical tingle that made his fingertips buzz. As soon as their skin made contact, the crystalline formations around them began to hum in harmony, creating a sound that was somehow both soothing and vaguely ominous. "Well," Kale said, steadying himself as she pulled him to his feet, "that's not concerning at all. Please tell me this planet has a lost and found office, because I seem to have misplaced my memory of how I got here. Memory displacement is actually quite common with interdimensional travel," Ella said matter-of-factly. brushing purple sand off his shoulders with the efficiency of someone who'd clearly done this before. The good news is that it usually comes back in bits and pieces. The bad news is that those bits and pieces rarely arrive in chronological order, so you might remember your childhood pet's name before you remember why you're here. Interdimensional travel. Cale felt his eyebrows climbing toward his hairline. I'm pretty sure I would have remembered signing up for that particular adventure. That's what they all say, Ella replied with a shrug that somehow managed to convey volumes about the general reliability of interdimensional travelers. Come on, standing around in the open makes us easy targets for the local wildlife. And trust me when I say you don't want to explain to a quantum predator why you taste like a walking probability anomaly, as if summoned by her words, something that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a geometric theorem drifted past overhead, its translucent body rippling with equations that hurt to look at directly. It paused, rotating slowly to orient several appendages that might have been sensory organs in their direction, then continued on its way with what Cale could swear was a disappointed sigh. Right, he said, watching the creature disappear behind a tower that existed in at least 4 dimensions simultaneously. Quantum predators, of course. Any other local hazards I should know about? Oh, the usual, Eller said, starting to walk toward what might have been a path if paths were typically made of condensed. Starlight and good intentions. Temporal eddies. Gravity wells that only affect things beginning with the letter H. And the occasional reality storm. Nothing we can't handle if we're careful and maintain a healthy sense of humor about the absurdity of existence. Cale followed her, partly because she seemed to know where she was going and partly because the alternative was standing alone on an alien world with his memories full of holes and his understanding of physics crumbling like a cookie in cosmic milk. You know, when I woke up this morning, assuming it was this morning and not last Tuesday, I'm pretty sure quantum predators weren't on my list of things to worry about. That's your first mistake? Eller called back, over her shoulder, her pointed ears twitching with what might have been amusement. The universe has a sense of humor, and it's exactly the kind that puts quantum predators on your schedule right after you decide they're not your problem. The path of condensed starlight turned out to be surprisingly solid underfoot, though it had the disconcerting habit of humming popular songs from civilizations Cale was reasonably certain he'd never heard of. Currently, it seemed to be working its way through what sounded like a jaunty folk tune about someone named Gerald, who had apparently made some very poor life choices involving a sentient asteroid and a dancing competition. Is the road always this musically inclined? Cale asked, stepping carefully around a section that was enthusiastically belting out what he assumed was the chorus. Only when it's in a good mood, Ella replied, hopping over a particularly animated verse with practiced ease. Last week, it spent 3 days playing nothing but funeral dirges. I think it was going through some sort of existential crisis about being a path instead of a proper highway. They crested a small hill, and Cale stopped so abruptly that Eller nearly walked into him. Spread out below them was what could only be described as a city, if cities were typically constructed by someone who had heard the concept, explained secondhand by a particularly creative child. Towers grew from the ground like crystalline trees, there, branches intertwining to form walkways that defied gravity with cheerful determination. Buildings floated at various altitudes, tethered to ground by streams of pure light, while others existed as geometric shapes that folded in on themselves in ways that made Cale's eyes water. Welcome to downtown Nexus Point, Alpha, Eller said, with the tone of a tour guide who had long since given up trying to make sense of the attractions. Population, 2, plus whatever that thing is. She pointed to a structure that appeared to be having an animated argument with its own shadow. 2. Cale blinked. As in you and me? Well, technically the quantum field registrations show about 47,000 residents, but most of them exist in a state of temporal flux. So they're really more like very persistent echoes than actual people. The city council meetings are absolutely chaotic. As they descended toward the city proper, Kale noticed that his shadow was behaving oddly, occasionally waving at things he couldn't see or striking poses that had nothing to do with his actual movements. Should I be worried that my shadow appears to have developed its own personality? That's actually a good sign, Eller said, watching as his shadow attempted what looked like interpretive dance. It means the local dimensional membrane is accepting your presence. If it starts doing the tango, though we should probably find somewhere to lie down until the reality adjustment wears off. They reached the outskirts of the city, where a sign written in letters that shifted between languages faster than Kale could read proclaimed something that was either "Welcome to our humble interdimensional nexus," or "Beware of the singing lampposts," depending on which moment you caught it. Right, Kale muttered as one of the aforementioned lampposts launched into what sounded like a passionate aria about the philosophical implications of providing illumination. I don't suppose you have any idea why I can apparently understand all of these languages. Eller paused, tilting her head to study him with those shifting violet eyes. That's actually a very good question. Universal translators are common enough, but you don't seem to be wearing one, and the neural implant scars will be visible. She reached out without warning and ran her fingers along his temple, her touch sending another of those electric tingles through his skin. No, implants, she confirmed, frowning, which means either you're naturally polyglottic across multiple dimensional variants, or she trailed off, her expression shifting to something that might have been concern if it weren't mixed with what looked suspiciously like scientific fascination. Or what? Kale asked, though he was fairly certain he wasn't going to like the answer. Or you're interfacing directly with a planetary consciousness, she said, stepping back and regarding him like he just announced he was actually 3 sentient house plants in a very convincing disguise, which would explain why the crystals keep staring at you and why that building over there keeps waving. Kale turned to look, and sure enough, a structure that resembled a cross between a Gothic cathedral and a friendly mushroom was indeed waving what appeared to be a decorative spire at him in greeting. He waved back automatically, then immediately felt foolish for doing so. Planetary consciousness, he repeated slowly, as in the entire planet is alive and thinking. Most planets above a certain age develop some form of collective awareness, Eller explained, as if this were as normal as discussing the weather. It's usually pretty basic stuff. Seasonal mood swings, mild preferences for certain types of weather, patterns, that sort of thing. But Nexus Point Alpha is special. It's been absorbing the thoughts and experiences of interdimensional travelers for millennia. It knows things, lots of things, sometimes more things than it knows what to do with. As if responding to their conversation, the ground beneath their feet began to pulse with a warm, welcoming light, and the sound of the singing lamppost shifted to a more harmonious key. A nearby fountain, which appeared to be made of liquid mathematics, gurgled what sounded remarkably like laughter. Great, Kale said, watching as the shadow gave the fountain an enthusiastic thumbs up. So, I'm psychically linked to a planet with abandonment issues and a tendency toward musical theater. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, it gets better, Ella said, her lips twitching with barely suppressed amusement. The planet also has opinions about interior decorating. She gestured toward a building that was in the process of rearranging its own architecture, walls flowing like liquid, as it settled into what was presumably a more aesthetically pleasing configuration. And it's been alone for about 300 years. So it's probably going to be a bit clingy. Clingy? Kale repeated as several more buildings began to lean in their direction with what could only be described as eager attention. A clingy planet with musical lampposts and mathematical fountains, and buildings that redecorate themselves. Don't forget the quantum predators, Eller added helpfully, though they tend to be less active during the day. Something about the local star's radiation giving them indigestion. Right, of course. Can't forget the quantum predators. Kale rubbed his forehead, feeling the headache from earlier, returning with reinforcements. Please tell me there's somewhere in this delightfully insane city where a person can sit down and have what passes for a normal conversation about why they're stranded on a sentient planet with someone whose job description apparently includes former queen of things that no longer exist. Ella's expression grew thoughtful, and for a moment the playful edge faded from her voice. "There might be," she said quietly. "But first, I need to show you something. Something that might explain why you're here and why the planet seems to think you're exactly what it's been waiting for." She turned toward the center of the city where a massive structure rose like a crystalline mountain, its faceted surface reflecting not the surrounding buildings, but images that seemed to come from somewhere else entirely. Other worlds, other skies, other possibilities dancing across its surface like captured dreams. "The archive," she said, and something in her tone made the singing lampposts fall silent. "Where all the memories of this place are stored and where all the answers you're looking for might be waiting." Cale looked at the impossible building, then at Ella, then at his shadow, which had apparently decided to start doing jumping jacks. "You know what? At this point, why not lead the way to the cosmic library? I'm sure it'll be perfectly normal and not at all likely to fundamentally alter my understanding of reality." "That's the spirit," Eller said, her smile returning, "as bright as starlight. Though, you might want to prepare yourself. The archive has been known to get a little enthusiastic about new visitors." The archive's entrance was having what could only be described as an identity crisis. As they approached, the massive doorway kept shifting between different architectural styles. Gothic arches one moment, sleek chrome surfaces the next, then something that looked like it had been designed by a civilization that communicated entirely through interpretive dance. "It's trying to make a good impression," Eller explained as the entrance briefly settled on what appeared to be a classical Roman portal before immediately switching to something that resembled a giant flower, made of crystallized music. "It doesn't get many visitors who can actually interface with its systems." "Should I knock?" Cale asked, eyeing the door uncertainly as it cycled through what might have been an ancient Egyptian motif crossed with modern abstract art. "Oh, that won't be necessary," Eller said, just as the entrance gave up its decorative efforts and simply dissolved into motes of light that swirled around them like curious fireflies. "The archive is nothing if not hospitable." They stepped through the space where the door had been, and Cale immediately understood why the building had been having trouble deciding on an appropriate facade. The interior was vast beyond comprehension, stretching in directions that shouldn't have existed, filled with structures that hurt to look at directly and walkways that existed in a state of constant geometric flux. "Right?" he said, trying to process the sight of a staircase that climbed upward by folding through dimensions like origami made of space-time. "I don't suppose there's a directory. Maybe something with you are here marked in several languages and possibly a few mathematical concepts. The archive organizes itself based on the visitors' needs," Eller said, stepping onto what appeared to be a platform made of crystallized thoughts. "Just think about what you want to know, and it'll take you there." "What I want to know," Cale muttered, following her onto the platform, "is why I feel like I've been dropped into a cosmic joke where the punchline involves my sanity." The platform immediately began to move, carrying them through the impossible space with the smooth efficiency of an elevator that had transcended the need for such mundane things as shafts or cables. They passed by floating shelves containing books that wrote themselves as they watched, holographic displays showing the histories of civilizations that existed only on Tuesdays, and what appeared to be a card catalog system maintained by a group of very diligent, geometric shapes. The archive contains the accumulated knowledge and experiences of everyone who's ever passed through this dimensional nexus, Eller explained as they glided past a section where memories hung like soap, bubbles, each one containing entire lifetimes of experience. Explorers, refugees, conquerors, tourists who took a wrong turn at Alpha Centauri. They all left something behind. "Including me?" Cale asked, watching one of the memory bubbles drift by. Inside it, he caught a glimpse of a blue sky and the sound of laughter that seemed achingly familiar. "That's what we're here to find out. The platform came to a gentle stop beside a structure that looked like a cross between a tree and a computer terminal, its branches crackling with data streams that flowed like digital sap. As soon as Kale stepped onto the walkway, the tree began to hum with activity, screens blossoming along its trunk like technological fruit. "Welcome, Kale." "Morrison," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We have been waiting for you for approximately 3,472 years, 8 months, and 6 days. Please, excuse the delay in processing your arrival. We had some difficulty calibrating our temporal sensors." 3,000 years. Kale stared at the screens, which were now displaying what looked like star charts overlaid with genetic sequences and probability matrices. "I'm pretty sure I'm not that old. I'd remember being 3,000 years old." That's the sort of thing that comes up in conversation. Time flows differently across dimensions. The archive's voice explained with the patient tone of someone who'd had this conversation many times before. "Your genetic pattern was first recorded here during what your people would call the Bronze Age, though the individual carrying it was named Kale Tarv and had a disturbing fondness for fermented fruit beverages." Genetic pattern. Eller leaned forward, studying the swirling data with obvious interest. "You mean he's not the first?" "Oh my, no. The Kale pattern appears roughly every 800 to 1,000 years, always in times of dimensional instability. Usually, they're quite helpful in resolving reality fluctuations. Though Kale 7 in the 14th iteration did spend most of his visit trying to teach our quantum predators to play what he called fetch, the results were chaotic. Kale felt a strange sensation, as if pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed were suddenly clicking into place. "So I'm some kind of cosmic troubleshooter, like an interdimensional repair technician, more like a living tuning fork." The archive corrected. "Your bioelectric field naturally resonates at the frequency required to stabilize dimensional barriers. It's quite rare and absolutely essential when reality starts to come apart at the seams." "And is reality coming apart at the seams?" Kale asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The screens around them flickered, displaying images that made his head spin. Galaxies twisted into impossible knots. Stars aging backwards, planets existing in multiple states simultaneously. "I'm afraid so. The damage began approximately 9,000 years ago when a certain galactic empire attempted to harness interdimensional energy for their expansion efforts." Elero went, very still beside him. "The Voldris Empire," she said quietly. "Indeed, Queen. Eller Valdres, I to be precise, though we understand the current Queen Eller is actually the 47th iteration and has been working to repair the damage for quite some time." 47. Kale turned to stare at Eller, who was suddenly looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the universe. "Your recurring pattern, too. It's complicated," she said, her cheeks taking on a distinctly iridescent flush. "The original Queen Eller created a temporal echo when she tried to undo the damage her empire caused. Every few centuries, the universe generates a new version of her to continue the work. I'm basically a cosmic apology letter that keeps getting resent until someone acknowledges receipt." "A apology letter," Kale repeated slowly. "Right. So, we're both recurring cosmic phenomena designed to fix a reality-breaking mistake made by your original incarnation's empire. That explains a lot about my morning so far. The good news," the archive interjected cheerfully, "is that this iteration appears to have the highest probability of success. Previous attempts have failed due to various factors." Kale Gen Moore was distracted by a chess game with a sentient nebula for 600 years. Eller 31 decided to become a traveling musician instead of fixing reality. And Kale Dine spent his entire visit writing what he claimed was the universe's first interdimensional cookbook. What was the success rate on the cookbook? Kale asked, because somehow that seemed like the most important question. Surprisingly high, actually. We still get requests for his recipe for quantum soul. Elora snorted with laughter despite herself. Of course we do. Leave it to a Kale pattern to accidentally become a celebrity chef while reality crumbles around him. I take offense to that. Kale said with mock dignity, I'll have you know that if I were to accidentally become a celebrity chef, I'd do it with style and possibly a cooking show called Fixing Reality with Fusion Cuisine. The universe would probably watch it, Eller admitted. And for a moment, the weight of cosmic responsibility seemed to lift from her shoulders. Actually, the archive said thoughtfully, that's not a terrible idea. We could broadcast it across multiple dimensions. The advertising revenue alone could fund several reality stabilization projects. They looked at each other and began to laugh. First, Ella with her musical giggle, then Kale with his deeper chuckle, and finally the archive with something that sounded like a cosmic wind chime, having a particularly good day. For a moment, surrounded by impossible knowledge and faced with universal consequences, they were just three beings finding humor in the absurdity of existence. All right, Kale said, finally wiping tears from his eyes. So, what exactly do we need to do to prevent reality from unraveling completely? Please tell me it doesn't involve quantum Soul. Oh, that would be much too simple. The archive replied. What you need to do is convince a 9,000-year-old interdimensional entity to let go of its grudge against organic life forms and stop using its reality manipulation powers to play increasingly elaborate pranks on the universe. A grudge? Ellera asked. The original dimensional rift, created when your empire fell in just tear holes in space-seam. The archive explained. It also created a consciousness out of pure wounded cosmic forces. It's been systematically destabilizing reality ever since. Partly out of pain and partly because it thinks the whole thing is hilarious. So, we need to provide therapy to an omnipotent, cosmic entity with a sense of humor. Kale said, right, Tuesday just keeps getting better. Finding a 9,000-year-old cosmic entity turned out to be surprisingly easy, mostly because it found them first. They were still processing the archive's revelation when reality around them began to hiccup, colors inverting randomly, gravity taking coffee breaks, and the floating shelves rearranging themselves to spell out what appeared to be crude jokes in 17 different languages. Oh, good. Eller sighed as her hair began flowing upward and her feet left the ground entirely. I think we're about to meet our cosmic comedian. The space around them folded like origami made of pure possibility, and suddenly they were standing in what could only be described as the universe's most elaborate comedy club. The stage was a swirling vortex of stellar matter. The audience consisted of probability clouds arranged in neat rows, and spotlights made of concentrated starlight illuminated a figure that looked exactly like what you'd expect if someone asked a committee of abstract concepts to design the physical manifestation of cosmic mischief. Ladies, gentlemen, and interdimensional troubleshooters, the entity announced, its voice carrying the weight of collapsing galaxies and the timing of a seasoned entertainer. Welcome to the Reality Comedy Hour. I'm your host, The Rift. You can call me Rifey if we become friends, which we absolutely will not because I've been holding a grudge for 9 millennia, and I'm nothing if not committed to my character development. Right, Kel, whispered to Eller, who was trying not to laugh despite their dire circumstances. Stage name probably she whispered back. Cosmic entities are surprisingly concerned with their public image. I heard that, the Rift called out, cheerfully. And yes, it is a stage name. My real name is an equation that causes headaches when properly pronounced. Now then, let's get to the main event, shall we? You're here to convince me to stop unraveling reality because it's causing problems for organic life forms. That's the general idea, Kale said, stepping forward despite the fact that his feet were still several inches off the ground. Though I have to ask, why the comedy club theme? Because the Rift said, spinning through dimensions like a cosmic dancer. If you're going to destroy the universe, you might as well have a sense of humor about it. Do you know how many civilizations have tried to stop me with serious speeches about responsibility and consequences? It's exhausting. At least you two seem to. Appreciate the absurdity of the situation. It's hard not to, Ella admitted as her hair briefly turned into a constellation of tiny stars. Though I have to point out that technically this is all my fault. Well, my original incarnation's fault, which makes it my fault by cosmic inheritance law. Oh, I know exactly who you are, Eloraldus the 47th, the Rift said, and for a moment its jovial tone grew serious. Just like I know who he is, Cale Morrison, the latest in a long line of cosmic repair technicians who keep showing up to fix what can't be fixed. Can't be fixed. Cale felt something cold settle in his stomach. The archive said we had the highest probability of success. The archive, the Rift said with something that might have been fondness, is an optimist. It has to be, or it would have given up cataloging the universes. Mistakes centuries ago. But here's the thing. I don't want to be fixed. The comedy club around them shifted, becoming something vast and lonely, filled with the echoes of civilizations that had been consumed by dimensional instability. Do you know what it's like to be born from pure cosmic trauma? To exist only because an empire's arrogance tore holes in the fabric of everything? I am literally made of universe scale. Damage. And for 9,000 years, everyone who's encountered me has tried to make me go away. Cale looked at Ella, who was staring at the entity with something that looked like understanding. You're not trying to destroy reality, she said. Quietly, you're trying to get someone to acknowledge that you exist. Bingo, the Rift said, and suddenly they were back in the comedy club. But this time, the atmosphere felt different, less manic, more genuine. Every civilization that encounters a dimensional instability tries to fix it, repair it, or contain it. No one ever stops to consider that maybe, just maybe, the living embodiment of cosmic damage might have feelings about being treated like a problem to be solved. So, what do you want? Cale asked, and he realized that somewhere in the conversation his feet had found the ground again. I want someone to acknowledge that I have a right to exist. The Rift said simply, I want to stop being treated like a mistake that needs to be erased. And I want to know that the organic life forms I've been terrorizing for millennia might actually be worth preserving. Cale felt that familiar electric tingle as pieces of the cosmic puzzle clicked into place. You've been testing us, he said. All the reality distortions, the dimensional instability. You've been trying to see if organic life would rise to the occasion or just crumble under pressure. A cosmic personality test with universe-ending stakes, Eller added. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Poor Coloestio, the Rift replied, cheerfully. But yes, essentially, and I have to say, you two have been the most entertaining candidates so far. Previous iterations usually spent the entire encounter either cowering in terror or lecturing me about responsibility. You made jokes. Humor in the face of cosmic. Horror is basically a survival mechanism at this point. Cale said, though I have to ask what happens now. Do we pass your test and you stop destabilizing reality? That depends. The Rift said, and the comedy club around them began to shift again, becoming something that felt like home, a place where impossible architecture made perfect sense, and singing lampposts were just part of the neighborhood charm. Are you willing to stick around and be friends with a reformed cosmic disaster? Because I've got 9,000 years of loneliness to make up for, and I hear you two are pretty good company. Cale looked at Elora, who was smiling with an expression he'd never seen before. Peaceful, complete, like someone who'd finally found the place they belonged. You know, he said, I was just thinking that Nexus Point Alpha could use a few more permanent residents. Plus, Ella added, someone needs to keep an eye on you to make sure you don't get bored and accidentally turn the local star into a disco ball. That happened one time. The Rift protested, and the locals loved it. They still have an annual festival celebrating the Great Sparkle Week. As the three of them laughed together, Cale felt something shift inside him, not just the electric tingle of cosmic forces, but something warmer, more human. For the first time and longer than he could remember, He felt like he'd found his purpose, not as some cosmic repair technician sent to fix the universe's mistakes, but as himself, someone who could find humor in impossible situations and friendship in the most unlikely places. So, he said, grinning at his companions as reality settled around them like a comfortable blanket. Anyone interested in helping me write that interdimensional cookbook? I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of time on our hands. Eller reached out and took his arm, her touch warm and electric and full of promise. It's time to go home, she said. But this time, the words weren't about leaving. They were about staying, about building something new in a place where broken things could become beautiful and cosmic disasters could learn to laugh at their own jokes. Home, Cale repeated, looking around at their impossible city with its singing lampposts and mathematical fountains, and buildings that rearrange themselves. For aesthetics. Yeah, I think I like the sound of that. And somewhere in the quantum static between dimensions, the universe itself seemed to sigh with relief, finally allowing its favorite comedy trio to get on with the business of turning cosmic chaos into something resembling a home. The end.